Okay, everybody, good morning. It's a Sunday morning, and I'm up early. Kind of figured I might be after right after we did the live stream last night. I looked at the new NAM right before I went to bed, and I just absolutely, nearly fell out of my chair because of what it did. Now, with respect to Jose, now here's the plan of attack here today as far as these live streams go. I am going to focus on Jose on this particular live stream, and then I'm going to take a very short break, and then I'm going to come back and do Maria because there's just way too much going on with both of those to combine them into one live stream. So I'm going to keep them separate. It'll make it easier for people later on who want to go just to look at one and not necessarily the other. If they want to look at both, they can click on two videos, but I'll leave that up to everybody. So good morning to you, Christopher. I know it's probably going to be not the biggest of audiences at 8 o'clock on a Sunday morning, but I just want to get this started and underway. So we're going to take a look at Hurricane Jose, which is front and center. Now, my thinking on this, just to start this off, is that the threat for tropical storm conditions for the immediate coast of the Northeast, and I'm talking about, Delaware. It might extend further south than that. I want to see what the day run does with this, but Delaware on up to New Jersey, Long Island, southern Connecticut, south coastal Connecticut, and southeastern New England. Maybe back to about New York City. Okay, so we're talking in New Jersey, east of the Garden State Parkway when you go down Monmouth County down south. So it's really going to be confined to that, stretch along the coast and also right along, obviously, the beaches. But if you're north and west of there, if you're north and west of eastern areas of New York City, as you start to go north and west and on up through the Hudson Valley and in through Connecticut, north of I-95, the impact, I think, is going to be, minimal. It'll be a question of how far west the rain gets, and it really will not be a big deal. It's right along the immediate coast that I think we're going to see rain, wind issues, and the potential for coastal flooding. Also, when it gets up north of 35 north, it's really going to be more of a hybridized type of system where it's going to take on the characteristics of a non-tropical cyclone. So the wind field will expand as far as those areas that I've just indicated. The rain shield will expand to the west. The strongest winds will begin to spread out, but you won't have the concentrated winds near the center. So we're not talking hurricane conditions here. This is going to be, this is going to mimic a moderate to strong nor'easter type storm for the coastal areas, assuming that everything goes according to plan here, because the plan seems to keep changing. But right now, with respect to Jose, there's an Air Force reconnaissance aircraft that's on the way. By the way, there are no tropical storm watches up yet. The Hurricane Center did indicate that they may put those up later today, or perhaps a little bit later on if models keep coming in with a sort of convoluted mess. The real issue here is the immediate coast and whether there will be tropical storm / nor'easter-like conditions with this. My primary concern is through all of this is if we wind up with something that lingers around for a while or does some crazy loop, you are going to have a prolonged period of high tides going into the new moon, so that we're going to have the potential for some coastal flooding, some coastal flooding over a number of tide cycles. So, I think for those of you on the immediate coast, you should just, kind of pay attention to that as we go through the next couple of days. So here we have Jose as a minimal hurricane. Top winds are 80 miles an hour. It's moving to the north. Looks like it's sitting at around 72 west and 30 north this morning. I don't think it's really moving all that quickly. Seems like it's on this, sort of slow crawl up northward. And that's really kind of allowed a few different things to happen in the upper layers of the atmosphere. The hurricane doesn't have the best of looks here. There is some shear going on. You kind of see how the cloud structure is getting a little distorted. It's growing in size, but it doesn't have quite that circular shape. It's got more of an oblong shape, and there's more action starting to go on the west side, as well as on the eastern side, obviously. But yeah, I think this is part of that slow process that we're going to see as it transitions over into something a little less tropical and a little more non-tropical. But given the setup along the East Coast with what's going on, it's still going to be somewhat problematic. Now, I kind of thought the Hurricane Center, with their forecast and discussion, really punted to a large degree. There were a lot of model changes during the overnight, and they weren't even addressed, and I'm not sure why. I know these guys have a lot to look at, and it's possible that they just kind of gave certain things a cursory glance, and they left it for the day shift to give it a better view. But I was kind of underwhelmed by the fact that you had such a radical change in some of the models and their approach to all this, and it wasn't really addressed very well. It wasn't really addressed at all. So here's the look on the enhanced view, and you can see there's a blow up of higher and colder cloud tops. The center's probably in that purplish blue spot that's right in the middle there. At least that's the way it seems. And again, you're starting to see a bit more of an oblong shape. It's kind of tilted there, northeast, southwest. So there's some evidence of some shearing going on in the upper layers of the atmosphere. And those winds aloft are going to be increasing as we go northward, so it's going to have some impact here, again, in that process of going from tropical to non-tropical. So here's the Hurricane Center's latest forecast, which really is an adjustment of the previous one. And we'll just take a look at this. It really didn't change it very much. They kind of take it to 38 and 70, and then they start to swing it east, and then they gradually widening that cone area because of the idea that it might do a loop. But some of the models actually have that loop occurring very, very in a very, very tight way and further to the west. So that's going to change the outcome with regards to the actual weather that's going to occur in the area, again, as we move up from the Delaware coast on up into southern New England. So it's not important that whether it remains as a hurricane or not is not really that important because of the fact that it's making this transition over. So again, in terms of what to expect, it might, and it would be confined to the immediate coast, coastal New Jersey east of the Garden State Parkway, eastern areas of New York City, and more so as you go across, through Long Island, especially the eastern half of Long Island, south coastal Connecticut, south of I-95, and southeastern New England. If you're north and west of those areas, you're really not going to get very much. And for those of you who are joining late, let me just tell you again, I'm going to be doing this live stream on Jose only, and then I'm going to take a break and do a second live stream on Maria shortly afterward. Okay, so save your Maria questions for later. There's just way too much going on with both these systems. And by the way, if Regal Racer is on, I just want to say thank you for hitting the super chat. You did it yesterday just as I ended the live stream, and I didn't see it until an hour later in the chat. So I just want to give you a very big thank you for that. And I could actually just see if you are on yet. And you are not on yet. So I will probably keep saying it until I see you on again. And also a collective good morning to everybody that is on this morning. The hurricane tracking models. Bear in mind, by the way, that the models are posted with a bit of a lag. So we may not actually be seeing the latest of the model runs that are available right now. But and also because it's making this transition, we really shouldn't focus too much on the specific track of this, because this just pretty much tracks the center. But we do have a fair number of models, including some that are pretty far to the left. But we do have a fair number of models that take it to the west of 40 and 70. And if this starts to look as like a non-tropical system, that 40 degrees north, 70 degrees west benchmark becomes more important, because that's with winter systems. If they go to or just to the left of the benchmark, the quote-unquote benchmark, they call it the benchmark because in the wintertime, some of the biggest winter storms that have impacted the coast, the lows go to that near that position, 40 and 70. But if we do start to see this, and I think we will, start to look more like a wintertime non-tropical storm or a nor'easter type storm, that you're going to see, if the low goes to the near or to the west of 40 and 70, it does impact the immediate coast. So here are the tracks for the hurricane models, and you can see all the looping that's going on out offshore. Some loop it very close, some are looping it further out, but this is all because of the fact that we've got steering currents in the Atlantic that are going to collapse, and that is going to put Jose in kind of a no man's land in the not too distant future. Okay, so now we're going to go to the weather models. I know weather models because all of you are asking about that, and you didn't think I wasn't going to do it. And the European model last night was a rather jaw-dropping type run. So why don't we, first off, we'll start with the new GFS. And before we even do the new GFS, I have yesterday's up here. So we're going to take a look at this first. So I want you to get a flavor of at least where the models have gone with Jose in the last 12 hours. So this is the run from, actually, this run is from 12Z on Friday. I don't know why it defaults to the run for the 12Z Friday run, but that's what it did. And this is where it took it very close and brought rain and wind to those coastal areas that I described. It actually took one band of rain pretty far to the north, brought it very close to Cape Cod, and then out to the northeast from there. But of course, obviously, things have changed since then. And we'll go to the 6Z run, which is the last model run that we have. And I will start from the very beginning. And so here we have it. Here's the eastern view. We're going to run it up the coast. It kind of coils its way northward. This is Monday afternoon. Then we got Monday night. Now we're into Tuesday morning. And you can see the GFS has the rain now back pretty west to about New York City, into the southern part of New Jersey. Some heavier rain over Long Island and southeastern New England. And the low, the actual L, is roughly, I'm going to try to put my cursor at the right spot. So roughly at about 37 and 72, or a little left of 72. And then it starts to move northeastward, still coiling around. And by, Tuesday, this is Tuesday afternoon, you've got the gradient right near the coast. So that would, produce some wind. We also have it pretty close to Long Island and southeastern New England in the gradient. Into 12Z Wednesday, and then you're going to see it start to drop and do this loop, okay? And on this particular run, the loop is about 300 miles on the GFS further west than what it was on the prior run. And then, of course, you start to see Maria come into play, and my mention of Maria at this point is the fact that Jose, it's very interesting through this process that we're seeing that Irma, the remnant trough of Irma, is what's impacting Jose right now and creating all these issues with regards to the ultimate track. And it's going to be whatever's left of Jose that's going to create tracking problems and forecast problems for Maria, because the Jose and the trough that it creates is going to create an opening for Maria off the East Coast, if this is correct. So we'll address that in the Maria live stream later on. Again, I just wanted to mention that really fast. But what's happening in the upper air is very interesting. You've got this remnant trough from Irma, and the models have had a very difficult time. I'm actually going to start back from Thursday's upper air. Okay, so we're back where Irma's still a very viable upper low here in the Ohio Valley. You have Jose well to the south and east as the ridge begins to build around it, and that's exactly what happened. Now that trough from Irma, you can see in the northeast that dip there in the jet stream with that little blue patch. That's the remnant trough. And it continues to weaken as we started to move through Saturday. Jose now breaks through the weakness in the ridge and starts to move up the coast. Now that remnant trough is still sitting here this morning, that closed line you see in eastern Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and touching New York City. That's a remnant little upper low, and it just sits there. Okay, instead of moving out, it sits there and starts to exert an influence on Jose right near the coast. So as a result, it lifts up and moves northward and then northeastward, and then starts to push it away to the northeast. We actually don't know how correct all this is. I'm going to show you the NAM model because the NAM model started this off last night. So I give it credit because I really had my doubts when I saw it. I just was wondering what in the name of God it was seeing. But here's the NAM's reflection of the upper air. And again, going back to Thursday, you can see the viable upper low that was the remnant of Irma. You can see Jose out in the Atlantic. You can see the beginnings of that upper high that cradles around it. The remnant trough now on Friday starts to weaken, but still hangs over much of the northeast. Actually, a piece of it went out, and then another piece lingered back. So you've got, what looks like an upper low in the Gulf of Maine, and you've got a remnant weaker trough back in the Ohio Valley, and Jose is about to punch through the ridge. See, so it cracks right through it, and now you've got this upper low, this remnant trough, and it's centered right here, this closed circle with the number 588 on it. There's a little upper low there, so there's a trough that's out in western Pennsylvania down into West Virginia. Jose is punching through, and now that trough is right over New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York State, over Long Island. You've got this, weak upper low here, and it's kind of like a magnet. It begins to draw Jose up northward. You see how the upper low doesn't really get kicked out, and notice how slow. These are hour movements, by the way, so it's a little deceptive. It's not really. It is actually moving fairly slowly because it takes all day Monday into early Tuesday just to come into the latitude of North Carolina, and then you've got the NAM actually moving it more west of north for a while, for quite a while, in fact. And there's the outcome here with the surface low getting pretty far north and west, and certainly north and west of where the GFS has it, and takes it to just south of Long Island. This is very close to what the European did, by the way. So, the NAM to me, people will say to me that, the NAM is not a good model, but, if you can't see the whole European run it, this is the next best thing when it matches up well. So if you want to get an idea of what the European run looks like in terms of what it did we see the 24-hour increments. We don't see the 24 hours in between. Well, the NAM I did get to see it. Unfortunately, you have to pay for it to show it publicly. So I can't show it to you without getting into lots of trouble. I don't want to do that. But since the NAM kind of looks like what the European looks like, it's a pretty good substitute. And there you have it. This is only going out to Wednesday. So when you look at this, we're going to look at it on the surface. And by the way, I know you guys are there. I will come back and I'll go through your comments and questions. But if we look at the NAM on the surface, and the radar reflection, so this is this morning, and the surface low is going to kind of coil its way northward. Sometimes it jogs a little bit to the east, sometimes it jogs a little bit to the west, and then it's just loading the rest of the maps. Okay, so then it actually moves west of north for a while, and you can see it. And you can see the bands of rain actually come onto the coast and get pretty far inland. This is for Tuesday morning at 7 a.m. With rain coming in and the wind picking up along the immediate coastal areas. And that low stays kind of tucked in west of 72 west. So in this position right here, it's at almost 73 west, 38 and a half, and nearly at 73. So that's actually slightly west and south. You know, it's south of New York City by about 90 miles or so. We'll keep on going here. Actually, a little bit more than 90 miles. And then I'm sorry, I did my math really. It's more like 150 miles. Then it moves northeast from there. So when it gets to this point, it's sitting at 40 and a half and 71.3. So this would be producing nor'easter-like conditions. And again, that's what I think we're going to see out of this. We're certainly not going to see a full-blown hurricane moving up the coast and plowing inland. That's not going to happen. And then as far as we can go, which is 2 p.m. on Wednesday, the low is sitting somewhere between Block Island and Nantucket, and much of southeastern and southern New England getting into the wind and rain, getting into wind and rain out of this. And when I show you the wind field, this is, by the way, toward the end, it gets a little bit different. The European starts a loop, a very, very tight loop. So the low is already moving, is south and east, south of this position, not that far south, but south, but it is south. And when we look at the wind field, and I'm going to get tighter on this so you can see just how the NAM and the European, I matched them up, and they, again, the wind fields shown on the NAM and the European are very close. But here it is. This is Tuesday evening, and the red area is basically 40 knots or sustained or higher, and it's touching the New Jersey coast with gales up and down the immediate coast into eastern Long Island, even through much of Nassau County, eastern Nassau County and Suffolk County to coastal Connecticut. You're into sustained, winds of 30 knots or more, and then that extends up into the coast of Massachusetts out to Cape Cod. And when we move it along, you can see those strong winds start to shift away from areas to the south and west, but it's still a pretty well-defined low here. And I don't know if the pressure is going to be that low, but certainly even if it's in the 980s, it's going to produce nor'easter conditions through the area that I described. Here's the European from last night. And there's the European's position, by the way, of the low. I'm going to put the wider map so we can take a look at how it looks with the isobars. And it has the low centered at 39.8, almost 39.9 north, and 71.5 west. So let's widen out. You can see the track again. Unfortunately, the European we're only able to see it in 24-hour increments. So you're going to see the 8 p.m. map for each day, and we also can't see it with the precip. I did see it with the precip. It actually was very generous with rainfall, and the wind field matches the NAM as I just showed you. But this is where it is a Wednesday night at 8 p.m. So it's slower than the GFS is. And that's another thing we're going to have to wonder about, because is speed, because the GFS being faster turns it to the east faster, where the other models, the European, the UCMET, the NAM, all slower. And the UCMET, by the way, wants to bring it way to the left. It takes it into southern New Jersey. But we'll back up and start with the initial. So here we are from Saturday evening, 8 p.m. Now we're going to move to Sunday evening tonight. This will be a good measure to see how well the European did, because it's forecast to be at 31.8, 72.2. Then by Monday night, it's forecast to be at 34 roughly. If I put it at the same place, so 34.8, 72.8. Okay, and then the next frame is for, I'm sorry, that was Monday night. So now we've got Tuesday night. Tuesday night, 8 p.m., 38 even, 73 west. So kind of jogs it up to the northwest. Then it makes that northeast hook. So we are roughly at about 40 and 40.2, 71.3. And then look how tight the loop is. From there, it drops it almost straight southward. That's where, it orchestrates the loop so much sooner. Well, I'm sorry, it orchestrates the loop much further west because it takes so much longer to get to where it's going that it gives time for this upper high to build to the north. And that's why the European does what it does. The upper high, because the GFS is faster, it allows it to get further out to the east before that upper high takes over. The European, being so much slower, says that it gets to around 40 and 70. The upper high is beginning to build now, so the loop starts to orchestrate faster. Now, I don't really particularly think the loop is that important to the way this all comes out, because of the fact that at this stage, we're going to start to see this cyclone decay. So it is going to be weakening. It will just prolong, winds along the immediate coast. But it's not going to be, as I said, it's not like you have a raging hurricane out here that's looping. You're going to have a system that's going to kind of get hybridized, behave like a nor'easter, and then start to weaken over time, and you can brings it back to the west as a decaying cyclone. The remnant trough of Jose here is then going to impact the track of Maria going forward, which the European takes just east of the Bahamas after ravaging the islands in the Antilles, and then after that it wants to bring it up the coast. At this point, we are in what I've always referred to as squirrel land, with regards to what the models are doing. But it is, this is how the upper air is playing out. And in fact, I'll show you with the upper air exactly what's going on. And there's that big upper high. You see how it's shaped like a banana, running from back over through Oklahoma into Texas, Oklahoma, then kind of arcs its way across the Great Lakes into the northeast. And remember, winds are clockwise around high. So that line that comes in from New Jersey is east to west. So the upper air winds from Virginia northward are actually from an east to west direction, as opposed to their normal west to east direction. And this is, by the way, for next Sunday night. So I'm already jumping a week ahead of time, but I want to show you just how all of this evolves with the upper flow with Jose. And, we've got that same idea from the other models, that remnant trough of Irma just sitting right along the coast, and it picks it up, lifts it northward, and then starts to hook to the northeast. But you start to see this upper high beginning to build back over the Great Lakes. And then, and because of the fact that we are now into Wednesday night, remember the GFS at Wednesday night is somewhere about 300 miles or so to the east of this position, okay, because of the fact that it does it slower. And here we are at Thursday night. You see that banana upper high is starting to build. You're starting to get those northeast winds aloft running from Maine down into Virginia, and you have the remnant low from Jose responding to that. And there's that upper high building over the Great Lakes into the northeast that brings the remnant low of Jose in. And now you've got it here next Sunday evening, and it starts to impact Maria. And then, the ridge in the east here is so monumentally important. And the remnant trough of Irma, it's again, I find it really amazing that it's going to be the way it's impacting Jose, and then it's going to be the remnant trough of Jose that's going to impact Maria. For those of you who are joining late, good morning to you. I'm separating the two storms, Jose and Maria, because there's too much to talk about with both of them on one live stream. So this is all going to be dedicated to Jose, and then I'll be taking a short break, and then we'll do a live stream dedicated to Maria. So I'm going to just now, let me get this down to, and Maria is, by the way, going to become a major hurricane before this is all said and done. It is a really, really sad situation. I spoke to somebody this morning on Facebook who is in St. Thomas, who told me, who said how, they have no phone. They have, very, very limited communications, and it's been, very difficult for them to get any sort of information out, so that I may be one of the only, one of the few venues they have. And anyway, she used the phrase about the fact that we don't have much communication, and then for that matter, we don't have much of anything anymore because of the damage that was done by Irma. And you have the island of Barbuda, by the way, which is for the first time in 300 years without a human being on it. Every person on the island of Barbuda has been evacuated. That's just, very sad. And those islands are going to get, ripped apart again. So, good morning to She Gadget. Will these storms eventually affect the UK? I don't, Jose, no. If it orchestrates that loop, it's not. Maria remains to be seen to see what that does. But right now, the answer for both storms, I would say, is no. Good morning to the Maestro Way and Isaiah Jacob. You just got a whole lesson on the European and what it did. Okay, so 99 Wolves, 102 mile an hour in the North Eye Wall. Okay, I know the mission was underway, so why don't we take a look? I'll pull it up and we'll see. We'll see what it had. So just hang on a second. Yes, it did. I can see this. All right, I will. I'll put it on the screen for you, and we can look at the actual recon since it's there. Here we go. All right, so here's the reconnaissance aircraft flight that's in there right now. The first pass, it comes in from the west, up near the top left part of the observations, and you can see that he turns toward the southeast. The blue on the scale is blue is gales, and the purple area is hurricane force winds of 64 to 83 knots. Flies into the center, 970 millibars, and you can see where the center is, by the way, with respect to what's going on the west side, which at the moment you're getting that bit of a sheared look. Then he flies out, and right in here he finds a belt of winds of 83 to 96 knots. So he probably found a flight level wind of 96 knots, which is 102 miles an hour. Well, no, it's more than that, but I'm sorry. So if he found 102 miles an hour, basically found 90 knots. So they'll probably carry 85 or 90 miles an hour. So certainly the 80 was justified. So they might nudge it up to 85 or 90 in the next advisory. And now he's about to make a second pass as he flew up north and now had turned southwestward. And the plane icon is pointing toward the center. So where they think the center is going to be. So it'll be north of this position, which is actually at about about maybe 30 and a half and about 71.9 is what the plane is, where the plane is at the moment. So at least it verifies the fact that Jose is every bit as strong as the Hurricane Center indicated has been indicating on their advisories. So the the estimates from the satellites are pretty good. Morning to James, NASCAR fan from North Belmore. any storm tide modeling for Jose yet. There's no storm surge interactive graphic yet on the Hurricane Center, but there is a storm surge interactive, another one that I looked at, basically forecasting a tidal surge of 1 to 2 feet on Tuesday into Wednesday. The other thing is I'm trying to just figure out, there was one other question that I had about the tidal surge. So a friend of mine just sent me. Okay, so actually it would be a 2 to 4 foot surge. The tides will be running, 2 to 4 feet above normal. But this is it's going to be, there'll be moderate coastal floodings for sure. And if if it's over a series of days with the new moon coming into play, that's going to be an issue going forward as well. So, a lot to watch here with regards with regards to Jose. But again, this is not coming in as a full-blown hurricane when it gets close to the coast. We're going to be seeing it in much more of a hybridized state. But you're going to have nor'easter-like conditions. And they're going to be, they're going to be the gales right along the immediate coast. But this is not going to be, there's a difference between that and a landfalling hurricane in terms of what the outcome is. So I just want to at least impair a sense of logic here, because you are going to see people, incorrectly jump over this on this and just say there's a hurricane coming up the coast. It's going to come in as a hurricane. It's going to be close by as a hurricane. It's going to produce hurricane conditions. This is different. There are going to be some issues for the immediate coast. Again, New Jersey, if you're west and north of the Garden State Parkway, your impacts here will be minimal. You may not even have to go that far away to just have a light breeze and some breaks of sun, believe it or not. If you're along the coast east of the Garden State Parkway, if you're on Long Island, back to about the eastern areas of New York City, south coastal Connecticut, eastward to southeastern New England, you're going to have wind and rain issues to contend with beginning Tuesday and lasting at least into Wednesday. The loop part to me is going to be with a decaying cyclone, so you're going to have conditions gradually diminishing as we move into Thursday and Friday. So I'm not really too concerned about the loop. We have cold ocean water, which is going to prevent this from holding its strength for a long, long time. So it is going to decay over time. So a very calm, logical look at this at the moment. All right, so there's no need, for anybody to be going off the deep end with regards to what to expect. Let's see. Do you think the slow? Well, yeah, Ryan Hastava, the slower movement leading to gaining some extratropical characteristics once it gets near our area. Yeah, and its interaction with the upper trough remnants of Irma is going to be doing that too. So, I think that's what the European is telling us, and I also think that that's what the NAM is telling us. The GFS is telling us that also. It's doing it. It's doing it faster and turning it to the east sooner, but it still has the same idea as the European and the GFS. I'm sorry, the European and the NAM. It's just taking longer to get there because of the fact that the speed on the GFS is different. Howard Vanderhoff. Hey, Howard, how you doing this morning? Any chance Jose may trend even further west in the track? Well, you know what, Howard? I think that's going to depend on the motion, the speed of Jose moving up the coast. If it moves up at a slow crawl, it's going to have there's a greater possibility of it catching that building upper high, which is going to slow it down even more, and then it's going to orchestrate that loop. It's going to start to orchestrate that loop sooner rather than later. And Jose will be further to the left as a result. So that's what you're going to have to look for. If the Europeans' position on this, I have to go back, when I have a little time, I'm going to go back and look at the European from yesterday and see how it did with respect to speed. Because I've noticed that the GFS has been adjusting, the position adjustments for the runs have been slightly south and west with every run. So it's telling me that the GFS may have been too fast. But I want to see specifically how the European model has done with respect to its positions and has the speed of movement. Because if the European has the speed of movement correct in its forecast, and the NAM is also very slow, then you're going to have this thing wind up being a bit more to the left. And by the way, the UK Met was way to the left. I mean, it basically took it into Delaware Bay. So, I don't know the reason why it did that. One of my forecaster friends of mine who works with models a lot says that the UK Met in the higher when it deals with tropical systems in high latitudes tends to be too far to the left. So that may be a little bit on the extreme side. Scott Olson, how many times do nor'easters do loops? Is this rare? Well, yeah, I mean, usually, nor'easters are basically, late fall, winter, early spring type cyclones that behave like cyclones usually do, which is to just sort of move right along. Sometimes they do slow to, some of the big ones in the wintertime, like the Boxing Day blizzard, the blizzard of '78 and a few others, they slowed down to, they came to almost complete stops for a while and did kind of little loops on them, in amongst themselves over a very, very tight area. But, yeah, it is very, very uncommon in general for a nor'easter to do a loop. But this is not really a true nor'easter. It's going to behave like one, but it has tropical characteristics, and it's the upper air pattern in the late summer and early fall, where you can have the upper atmosphere basically showing absolutely no steering flow, and that's what it is here in the eastern part of the United States with this big upper high. If it wasn't for the remnant trough of Irma, we'd have no flow at all. And I think Jose wouldn't even be coming up the coast. He would probably be heading western or northwest at this point. Right, blizzard of '78, Christopher. That's correct. There's a few of them that have done it, but those are special circumstances with blocking patterns and upper lows in a very dynamic flow, upper air pattern with strong jet streams running around all over the place. It's kind of it's a different meteorological animal. But it does happen. Even though the NHC didn't change their forecast much, the wind speed probability chart really changed from yesterday, increased the tropical storm force winds all over the area. Yeah, and I think what happened is, my guess is this morning they kind of looked at everything. Look, it's a midnight shift. I mean, I don't know how they do it there in terms of what time they bring people in. And these guys have been working like, I can't really criticize them too much because, they've been working really, really hard, and they have done a phenomenal job, by the way. I think just, maybe they just decided, look, let's wait till we get all these model packages in. We'll give it a really, really tight look. There's no, there's no rush for us to put up watches at 5 a.m. on a Sunday morning. Maybe we'll do it at 11 a.m. instead when more people are awake, and there'll be a bigger impact. So this will give us more time to really look at, the models and especially the European, because, their comment on the discussion was the European shifted a tad west. And I just shook my head on that. I said, you've got to be kidding me. That's not a tad, but it did not shift a tad west. So I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, and we'll see what happens. Okay. The rain in New Jersey, this thunderstorms are mostly winds. Tracy, again, whatever right now, from what I'm seeing, it's going to be all east of the Garden State Parkway. So if you're north and west of the Parkway, I really don't think you're going to see very much out of this. Okay, and it'll just be some, squally showers that'll be coming through here. Maybe a steadier rain right along, in areas to the west. There might be a couple of bands that'll sneak up before they fall apart and weaken. But, I can envision a scenario where the western and northern counties see, clouds with breaks of sun, while right along the immediate New Jersey coast, it's raining with a 30 knot wind from the northeast. So you're gonna be able to drive a small distance inland and see a very large change. Isaiah Jacob, which model am I leaning to? Well, you know what? I think the NAM European combination has me very intrigued from a forecast standpoint, and the fact that the GFS seems to be trying to come around to the Europeans' idea, although it's just taking a little longer to get there, makes me think that maybe it'll be a compromise between the GFS and the European. But I want to go back. I'm going to go back and look to see how the European is done in terms of where this thing is right now and where it forecasted it to be, and whether the European was too slow, or if the NAM was too slow. But the NAM followed the European very well, and when the European catches these things, it usually, the NAM kind of goes along for the ride. The NAM sniffed something out last night that the European caught on to. So we're going to just have to see how this goes. All right, folks, let me stop it right here. For those of you who are looking for information regarding Tropical Storm Maria, which will probably become a hurricane later today, or if not later today, I think certainly by sometime tonight, and heading for the Leeward Islands. We've got numerous hurricane watches up now. I will be taking a very short break here and then coming back and doing a live stream specifically on Hurricane Maria. Regal Racer, if you're on, thank you very much for hitting the super chat last night. I really appreciate it. That you hit it as I got off the live stream, and I did not see your message until about an hour or so later. So I don't want to neglect you, saying thank you, but you may still be asleep because it is a Sunday morning. All right, so let's take a break, and I'll be back in just a little bit. Figure it's 8:50, so figure it about 9:30 Eastern time. I will come back and we'll do Maria. All right, if you're not here for Maria later on, have a great Sunday. If you are coming back, have a great 40 minutes, and I'll see you at 9:30.